No. No. Oh, hi. As the Fox censor, it's my job to protect you from reality.
Questions. We have questions for you, Prime Minister Trudeau. So this week, the Conservatives had tried to put forward an amendment to your very controversial Bill C-10. You know, the one that wants to censor the internet, the one that wants to allow the CRTC to regulate everything. Well, the Conservatives have put forward an amendment to that legislation that would have protected social media users. It was something the NDP said that they could support. Even the Bloc Québécois said that they would support that, which would have put your legislation in a bit of jeopardy. But in true form, the NDP couldn't find their spine, and the Bloc, well, does what the Bloc always does and only acts in their best interest or self-interest, and voted with your government to continue on with the legislation, and that amendment by the Conservatives was shut down, thereby putting millions of people at risk and under the potential scrutiny of the federal regulator of CRTC. So now your government, Justin Trudeau, wants to ram this legislation through, get it passed quickly and through the Senate before the Senate rises for this summer. But there has been no opportunity for real questioning on it. In fact, your government is even trying to limit the number of questions or the length of questions. When this piece of legislation is so significant and so important, not only for our freedom of speech, but for our democracy. And why your government continues down this road of wanting to squelch that and just stamp down on our voices. That sounds awfully more like China, doesn't it, Mr. Trudeau?
Any customer of Air Canada who wants a refund for certain pandemic-related cancellations will receive one as soon as reasonably possible.
We know COVID-19 has had such a significant impact on every business, every single industry. Well, no industry was hit even hardest than of the airlines. Millions of pilots have lost their jobs, many flight attendants, and not only that, those that work inside the terminals, all those jobs have been put at risk or they've lost them. Well, of course, Mr. Trudeau, your government decided to provide a $5 billion bailout package to Air Canada. Now, that in of itself, we're used to that. We're used to money for businesses. We're used to the bailouts happening. But you could have at the very least looked a little bit closer at the negotiations and said to Air Canada, don't pay your executives $10 million in bonuses till all passengers' tickets were returned and refunded. And at the very least, the industry itself was getting back on its feet. But instead, Air Canada does what any company would do. They gave their executives their $10 million bonuses. That's a significant slap in the face to not only the patrons and the customers, but to all taxpayers. So once again, your government failed to look at the finer print, or at the very least, your government failed to play a little bit of hardball. It's pretty simple. We're going to give you $5 billion of taxpayers' money. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to forego your bonuses this year. It may not sound like a lot, $10 million versus the $5 billion bailout, but it's symbolic, and it's not an insignificant thing, especially when so many people at Air Canada lost their jobs.
Children's shoes and moccasins, a teddy bear, flowers. Those are what surrounds the Centennial Flame, just steps away from this house, to honor the Indigenous children who never returned home because of the residential school system.
Horror has struck our country. Mr. Trudeau, you weighed in on the unmarked graves of 215 children found outside Kamloops, BC. You gave platitudes, as you often do. You said a lot of things that perhaps you think make people feel good. But how about some action, Prime Minister Trudeau? What the Aboriginal communities need, what the Indigenous communities need, is to be made whole again. But there are potentially 130 other sites like this where residential schools sat upon. We know from the Truth and Reconciliation report, which your government hasn't really done much and acted on, we know from that report that there are potentially more of these unmarked grave sites around the country. So you are not shy about spending money. So how about making some investments and putting some tools and resources towards actually the equipment that could help discover, or at the very least look around these areas in order to find out if indeed another horrific tragedy struck. Again, 130 residential schools across this country, other sites like that. If there are discoveries made, Those families then have an opportunity to say goodbye to their loved ones. There is a closure brought to it. We don't need platitudes. We don't need words to make everybody feel good about themselves. We need the Indigenous community, Canadians need action. Those 215 babies need some closure. And your government, Mr. Trudeau, should be acting. So will you? We know you have questions, so give us some comments below. Log on to Facebook and Twitter, let us know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.